Hi, everybody. This is Charles Hoskinson, broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Always warm, always sunny, sometimes Colorado. I actually had my journal scheduled today, an AMA, and I was debating, do I do it? Do I not do it? And I said, fuck it. I'll feel better. Let's do an AMA. Nothing really to discuss that's of too much significance. Went to crypto and went to DEF CON and the rest of the gang. Had a lot of fun there. As I mentioned, DEF CON was a little weird this year, but there were still some really interesting presentations on election security and these types of things. And crypto was a lot of fun. Talked to Bart Pernille, saw Dan Bonet, a lot of the other usual suspects that you tend to run into. We had a lovely discussion about Tornado Cash and the regulatory implications of what exactly had been done there. State of the art of cryptography is still advancing pretty rapidly. Lattices look like they have a big win. So does hash-based crypto. A lot of good papers there for post-quantum. Har states are really interesting. So there's a lot of really good work that's being done translating classical cryptography to the quantum world. And, the usual slew of papers there. I missed 2 days of crypto because I had to go to Canada for some stuff and just got back today. So all things considered, pretty successful event. And I'm now going to a very applied conference at the end of the month at Stanford, where we're opening our lab. So, fun stuff there. On the gaming side of the world, I think we'll eventually have something for Crypto Bison to say soon, and we'll see what that is. Also, had a chance to spend some time with my brother. Many of you know that he actually used to do Super Nintendo and Nintendo repair before he became a doctor. And he still kept all of his contacts and connections inside that world. And so we had a lovely conversation about what it would take to actually build a Super Nintendo game these days. And it turns out there's actually a amazingly large hobbyist community that builds Nintendo stuff. And they make games still for that platform. It's a little different. I guess there's a basic to assembly compiler that translate like a high-level language to the assembly that's on the cartridges, and they've modified the cartridges a bit to be a bit more powerful, but there's still a lot of unreleased stuff that needs a little bit of a tender love and care push. And a very primitive platform. You only have 4 megabytes of addressable memory. I think it's a 16-bit system, so it's not very powerful at all. But, they do their best. Anyway, a lot of these types of things. So let's get to your questions. What's the best thing to do for a beginner to get into computer programming? That's a good question, and it kind of changes. Lex Friedman also asked me about that when I was on a show. He's a big programmer, and he just recently had John Carmack on a show. So if you have some time, Carmack broke my record. I thought it would stand for a while. I was on Lex for over 5 hours, and Carmack was there for 5.5, and I suspect they probably went for over 6 with editing. And but it's Carmack. He's like a living legend. And he's also one of the best programmers in the world. So it's always fun to kind of get his perspective of what's a good programming language or not. So in my view, it depends on your age and your motivation for when you think about what's the best option for doing a programming language, writing something in a programming language. Certainly there are some basic principles of computer science that you're eventually going to have to learn if you desire to be effective. Data structures, algorithms, concepts of like how to do test-driven development, learning how to do a version control system, working with a command line. These are all tools of the trade. Building and configuring your IDE and getting a proper development workflow, working with a debugger real time, quality assurance things like linters and so forth. But the core of it is saying, well, what language can you learn that doesn't get in the way of being able to do interesting things? And it used to be that in computer programming pedagogy, it was, well, we're going to teach you a structured language that shows you the nuances of everything. And like Java or C++ or C or Lisp. And it really gets deep. And then there's another school that said, well, we're going to teach you a language that allows you to do things very quickly. Something that you're instantly doing stuff like shell scripting or Python or JavaScript, where You have a lot of options, and it's very easy to write things, do things, build things, and you get it done. I think that it's probably a good idea to learn Python or JavaScript as your first language, and just start with a collection of milestones. So projects of things you want to do and want to accomplish, and see if that inspires you enough to be able to then get to the next level of learning an actual full grade language like a C or a C++ or a Java or so forth. There's a great all-inclusive specialization on Coursera on Python 3, which basically covers everything to get you started. And there's a lot of great books from No Starch Press that have things that teach you how to automate stuff and so forth with Python. And that's a very powerful language for web scraping, data science, AI, and just thinking in code in that respect. And professionals use it, beginners use it, and it kind of gets you started. Now, you'll develop a lot of bad habits if all you do is just play around with Python, and you'll be a little challenged when you're dealing with meta programming or dealing with types or these types of things. So it is probably pretty important to have a plan for how you go beyond that. And in particular, this is why I'm a little bit more biased to the JavaScript TypeScript world, because at least it's more structured in that respect, and it's a bigger ecosystem, but Python's quite powerful. So I'd start there, and the pedagogy is phenomenal in that respect, and there's lots of good things. Thank you from African Union Shield Foundation, Project Shield, me and James C. Yeah, I met with a very interesting man named James who showed me his birth certificate, told me it took him 2 years to get a birth certificate. It's from Liberia. And he happened to show up for crypto, and we had a lovely conversation about identity, and I referred him to the Africa Credential Alliance and to John O'Connor. It just was a great case study in how hard it is to get an ID and get economic identity if the culture you're from doesn't have good infrastructure for that. So hopefully we can find a way to collaborate and do something. Charles, is there anyone you look up to that's alive today? It's a very good question. There's a lot of people that I really do look up to, like Matthew Ricard is one of them. They frame him as the world's happiest man. And the great part about Matthew is that he started as a scientist, and then he became a Buddhist monk, and he basically just devoted himself to inner contemplation. And he developed a very loving kindness aspect of meditation, which paid dividends in putting him in a perspective where he feels, for the most part, pretty happy every day. And that's hard for us to achieve. We have moods that go way up and then way down. So that's super cool. I look up to Lex Friedman. I really admire his intellectual curiosity, his openness, his desire for dialogue, his pursuit of self-perfection, his discipline as a person, and overall just his quest to understand basic things that we all experience but never get to fully define. For example, consciousness and love and these things. I think the world would be a much better place if we had people who constantly did that on a regular basis. I admire Jordan Peterson, a dogged defense of definitions, an understanding of the role of mythology, archetypes, and models in the development of culture and people, and the need of these things for a stable, cohesive society, as well as the ability to communicate very complicated concepts and thoughts in a long arc. There are some people who are very concise. Peterson is not, but it's always a story with him. He always takes you on an adventure and a journey, and that's been quite formative for me. I admire Terence Tao. I really admire how remarkably brilliant and capable he has been throughout his mathematical career. And if you read his blog or his proofs, there is a boyish fascination and a desire to always challenge the limits. He's absolutely fearless in what he does, and he just has this amazing ability to solve things in elegant ways. I haven't seen that since Grothendieck. So really admire him, admire the work ethic, admire that he's still productive, that he does really interesting things. So there's a lot of people I do admire, and some I've met, some I've interacted with, others I haven't. And in all those cases, each one of them represents something that I would like to have in myself. And I always say, how do I get there? And how do I move in that particular direction? And I think that's probably a healthy way of looking at it. Charles, any networking book would you recommend for cryptocurrency? I assume you're referring to computer networking. And unfortunately, there's no canonical text for this area. It's a very, very underpublished and under-resourced area. We published a paper called The General Scuttlebutt that talked about peer-to-peer networking and cryptocurrencies. And the problem is the design of peer-to-peer networks in general. It's one of those things that is understood in engineering lore. And there are certainly protocols that emphasize this, like Kademlia, for example. But in practice, what's happened in the cryptocurrency space is those protocols are inadequate for the types of attacks and the needs of sophisticated consensus systems like proof of stake. So what's occurred is all this protective sentinel code is put on, and all these protocols are put on to actually show you how to run a network like that. And you don't actually see that reflected in a vanilla networking protocol. So, for example, if you look at the design of libp2p and you actually look at the implementations of these things or any of these other peer-to-peer protocols that have been built or designed for cryptocurrencies, you'll notice a lot of things that are there that are non-trivial and not necessarily fully understandable. So this is an area that desperately needs a book to be written about it. And unfortunately, there is none. So I'd just recommend looking at the peer-to-peer papers that have been published recently that talk about the design of a peer-to-peer stack. Davis Shee has one, and then we wrote one as well. And there's a few others floating around. But if you really, really, really want to understand these things, then probably good to dissect functioning cryptocurrency and look at the network stacks. In particular, look at Bitcoin's network stack as a reference point, and then any of the proof of stake protocols that are third generation, like Polkadot or Cardano. Probably a good idea to dissect their network stacks, because you'll notice there's a lot more to ours than Bitcoin's because proof of stake requires it. And I wish there was a book I could refer you to. I'm just not aware of one. Is there any possibility of changing the name of Cardano to a more appealing name? I don't know. If you guys decide, go ahead and do it. Be fun. I like Cardano. In the past, I remember you saying Gavin reached out and he plans to do something together. Not currently, but if there's ever a collision of interests, I suspect we will. I'd love to collaborate on standards. I'd love to collaborate on smart contracts. I'd love to collaborate on future protocol design. Gavin's a very bright guy, and he's got a lot of good people in the Polkadot side, and it's a good community as well. So it'd be a lot of fun to see if we could figure something out. But it's just one of those things where there has to be a dual need, and a dual desire. So that's the nature of partnerships. Charles, do you think Elder Scrolls 6 will be released before the polar ice caps melt? Hard to say. The Microsoft acquisition definitely changed the culture, as has for all the studios that they've absorbed, and they don't have a great track record of being able to enable those acquisitions to move quickly. But Microsoft is a very different company today than it was even 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So maybe the culture has changed enough to enable that. And Bethesda is a very powerful company. It's got a very good leadership group, and they've done a lot of interesting things. The Elder Scrolls series has been hobbled in many ways by the same thing that hobbled Warcraft, where Warcraft 2 led to Warcraft 3, and then you'd expect to see a Warcraft 4, but then they released World of Warcraft. So a lot of the air got taken out of the urgency to develop Warcraft 4 or these other things, because you have this MMORPG asset that's generating money. So you have Elder Scrolls Online, and it's there, it's building a world, it's generating money. Is there a lot of urgency to go when you have a strong modding community and you still can sell millions of copies of DLC and anniversary editions and so forth for Skyrim? Yeah, I can see it. Yeah, but you got other stuff. You got Fallout. You got, I guess, a new franchise is coming out under Bethesda. So I can kind of see it. It's just a shame they didn't release anything a little earlier. And I think it probably would be prudent for Bethesda to really start thinking about middleware collaboration. In particular, it'd be really cool if they embraced the Unreal 5 engine, or next generation CryEngine or stuff like that, as opposed to rolling their own graphics engine, because then they could focus so much more on the storytelling component and these types of things. And I think it would add a lot of value to Unreal and actually create a situation where maybe they can get a lot of modding out of it. But it is what it is. It's just a Fallout 4. I had a lot of problems with the game, technical issues, bugs. It really, for the time that they invested, it was not what was up to snuff from graphics. And I don't think their forte is graphics. They should focus a lot more on narrative, story development, AI, combat mechanics, magic mechanics, and so forth. The other problem I've had with the Elder Scrolls series is there's been a gradual dumbing and casual gamification of the Elder Scrolls. In particular, you go from Morrowind, which was like, I'll just bring up my spreadsheet and write my macro and, and go and refer to my 300-page, tutorial on alchemy and spell design, to Skyrim, where you can't make your own spells, and a very simplistic alchemy system and very simplistic enchanting system and so forth, which has been modified by modders, but still is primitive. And the more desire to move in that direction, the less appealing the games are to me. But, I'm kind of old school in that respect. Damn, Charles really kicked the hornet's nest this time. Guys, grow up and get over it. People can have opinions, and this is not a problem that's in my hands. At IO, we write software and we do things and we work with people, and the sun gets up tomorrow. We still do what we do, and we wake up and, still work hard. It's nothing is materially changed. I think it was mostly just disappointment on my side, because people need to understand that the words they say, the things they do, carry weight and consequences. It's very easy at this point in my career just to be hands off and stay out of the engine room and just kind of go and play with Bison. Really is. But that doesn't serve any interest to the community, and it doesn't serve any interest from a pedagogical sense about what needs to be done. At the end of the day, there are a lot of leaders now, and those leaders have to acknowledge and understand that they no longer have full autonomy and full freedom of speech and full discourse and dialogue like they used to enjoy, like I used to enjoy. They're under scrutiny, and the things they say and do are ultimately going to be judged by people in and out of the community. And you have to really think, well, why do processes exist? Why do guardrails exist? Why do we have checks and balances? It's kind of funny. It's like all this FUD came out about how IO was unilaterally in control of the network, and then we're like, well, you need 75% of the SPOs to upgrade before anything gets done. So it's like, we're not in charge here, guys. You are. And that'll be formalized more through the SIP process, but that's how it's always been. And that's where we're at right now as a network. And system works. And if you work within it, you can get a lot more done than if you work outside of it. You just kind of create friction, and people are going to learn that one way or the other. Don't really affect me. If you criticize me over Twitter, you say I'm a poo-poo face or these types of things. Doesn't matter. Nah, not really. Come on, guys. We're all friends here. I just want what's best for the ecosystem. I want, given the fact that so much time, money, and effort has been invested into building this great ecosystem by a lot of companies, a lot of people, for Cardano to be not only a success, but a revolutionary product that changes the world. And when I see an opportunity to kind of push people in a certain direction, I do go into the engine room and start shouting loud. And some cases it creates blowback and short-term disgruntlement. But people have to see that I care. Charles, any interest in Return to Monkey Island? Yes, it's a cool game. Actually, I really liked Freddy Farkas. Yeah, that was a cool game as well. Charles, what do you think of the Tornado Cash sanctions? Now, that's a very interesting one. It's a very unique one. So there's a court case, Dan Bernstein versus the Ninth Court of Circuit Appeals, which ruled that code is free speech. So the protocol and developer understanding that we have as developers is that when we write code, it's an expression. And as long as we don't get involved in the running and use of that code for purposes, we're just writing it. It's like writing a book. So, for example, you could write a book saying, here's how you make cyanide. Here's how you build a bomb, these types of things. And for the most part, that's just words. You're not really telling people, go do this. You're just writing stuff down. Now, in a free society, we generally allow people to do these types of things. And it is deeply uncomfortable when they start saying no, because the problem is that it's not clear where to cut that and where intentionality comes into play. So generally look for a conspiracy to commit. So for example, you write the book, but then you also start distributing the book amongst extremist groups and making statements like, you should use this to go bomb some people. Then you've kind of crossed a threshold of an academic conversation and the sharing of knowledge to knowledge with intent to do something. So generally, if you'd see a sanction with a developer of an open source project, like a Tornado Cash or some dark pool, or like the Silk Road, for example, then you'd say, oh, well, they created it and then they operated it and used it and profited from it. And if that was the case, this would be another Silk Road, another issue, just like any other. The problem here is they went farther back to an area that seems to be unconstitutional and said just by participating and writing that code and being involved in that, it somehow means there was an intent and an operation of that system. Now, a strict interpretation of that would mean that basically they're asserting that software developers are accountable for how their software is used, regardless of whether they can control that or not, which is an extremely dangerous precedent. For example, if you want to go really far and extreme, the Linux kernel developers are creating the kernel of an operating system. North Korea could take that kernel, build a proprietary OS, and use that to be the operating system of an ICBM. So hypothetically, you could say the maintainers of the Linux kernel are contributing to the nuclear weapons program of North Korea. You could say that if you wanted to. So obviously that's absurd. But the problem is that the same legal structure that would allow you to infer blame on the Tornado Cash developer if they weren't involved in the use and operation of the system, they just wrote the code, could technically be reused this way. And this is why the EFF and others who are in the privacy space and in the digital rights space are rightfully so extremely scared about the precedent that something like this is going to set. So I don't think it's constitutional. And I do think that they're going to need to produce some evidence beyond just the discussion, just the code, in order to be able to make the charges stick, because there's already a court case about this. Dan Bernstein versus the Ninth Circuit, versus the government. It was the Ninth Circuit. And he won. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that pushes through. Yeah, and actually, this is a good point. The Tornado dev got 30% of the pre-mine, so he's got skin in the game for how it's utilized. My understanding, and again, I'm not deep enough in this to be able to fully grok it, is that was not how they approached it, because they could have easily made an economic crime and said the allocation of funds, the profiting from it, was somehow connected to the dark market. My understanding, they arrested him for the use of the code and asserted he was developer. But I need to get better informed on the issue, because there's been a lot of sensationalism about it. But I've only just read what the EFF has had to say and others, and there were several people at Crypto talking about it. So I'll have to look into it a little bit more. And I think the existence of a pre-mine may be sufficient to infer a slightly larger than normal influence, and that's the competitive difference of the two. That said, if they never used the money, they never cashed out the money, it was just allocated, or if they didn't have the ability to use the money, that's another interesting thing. I don't know what does a token mean in this respect. Certainly, if you profit from it, you cash it out, you do something. It seems to be different. But what does it just having a token mean? I don't know. Shout out to King's Quest 7. Was that the Mask of Eternity? Because that had a bug in it for me, and I couldn't get past the underworld because the game would freeze every time I went through. What do you make of Sam Harris's recent comments? I think you're referring to Sam saying that he didn't care if Biden's son had dead children in the basement. He still would vote for him. It just shows you the extreme lengths of Trump derangement syndrome. That's okay. Sam is pretty upset about the whole Trump era. He's the antithesis of everything he stands for. Charles, what are your thoughts on the top person in longevity medicine and why? Probably at the moment, going to be David Sinclair. He not only has a long track record at Harvard of great discoveries and great knowledge, he's a very effective communicator with his podcast, his book Lifespan, and he's a good collaborator. He works very well with other people. And the approach that he's taking, he's basically saying, it's not necessarily that we lose information in the hardware, so the DNA side. And the argument he has, you can take DNA from an old creature, clone it, and make another creature with that, and they go through the entire life cycle. It's information loss in the epigenome. And there's more to the story. Aging is caused by a variety of factors. It's a complicated topic, but the long and the short is that there is some notion of deterioration in how your body maintains protein homeostasis. There's a deterioration in telomeres. There's a deterioration in where senescent cells are just floating around and they're not being cleaned up properly. Stuff just starts breaking down. And there's plenty of books about this. Like Aubrey de Grey was one of the formative people in the longevity and anti-aging movements in the 2000s and 2010s. Been mostly replaced by Dave Sinclair at the moment. And I think Dave is onto something, because what he's been doing is he's been cloning mice, and he's doing something to one mouse and nothing to the other mouse. He's leaving it as a control. And then real time, you watch one mouse get old and the other one stay younger. That's pretty compelling, because they're genetically identical and they're in the exact same environment, the exact same circumstances, the same diet. It's really hard to get a better control than that. And there are creatures in nature that seem to have the ability to rejuvenate themselves. Salamanders have tremendous regenerative capabilities. There's jellyfish that live forever. They form a cyst and then they go back to the polyp stage, and then they become a medusa again, and they can go back to polyp and so forth. And at the end of the day, a lot of the things that Dave is saying are saying, well, life had two tracks, a time of abundance and pleasure and a time of scarcity and pain. And when it's abundance and pleasure, be fruitful and multiply. and then once you've multiplied, die off. When you're in pain and scarcity, you don't have the ability to multiply. It's evolutionarily counterproductive. So instead, turtle up and live longer until you have the other condition, then be fruitful and multiply. So a lot of the techniques that they're using for anti-aging involve stressing the body in clever ways. And you have different pathways from like mTOR and these types of things. And so Lifespan's a great book. And there's a lot of really good information there. And ultimately, it's nothing revolutionary if you happen to be a person inside the field, but it is very eye-opening that aging is effectively a process that we're starting to actually understand to the level where we may actually be able to do something about it, not just slow it down, but also rejuvenation. So this has led to my fascination with hyperbaric chambers, because there's a company called Aviv Clinics that's using them for rejuvenation, and they've had phenomenal results. And it's also led to my fascination of cell-based programming, where people are like companies like BitBio, for example, are trying to figure out a language, a chemical language for cells. And if you expose the cells to the right things, you can actually turn them back into other things. So there was a Japanese scientist who got a Nobel Prize in medicine who actually figured out the chemical compositions to take a cell and turn it into another cell. And later derivations of that work led the ability to turn a cell into a stem cell. So you could take like a skin cell and turn it into a heart cell or to a liver cell or to a brain cell and so forth. And it indicates that there is a chemical programming language for these things. And hypothetically, if you understood it, you'd be able to program cells in just the right way to do things like kill themselves or multiply or rejuvenate and these types of things, which would be great for the treatment of cancer. And there's a lot of amazing stuff that's happening there. Dave actually used these techniques in his lab to restore eyesight for an old mouse. And it was really clever. Now you have to be really careful with it, because if you revert cells back to these proto states, you probably give people cancer. So it's a very complicated field, and there's a lot of moving pieces. And some of you know that I own a company that is starting to get involved in this field, and we're approaching it from the clinical side. So we're starting with a health and wellness center, lots of doctors, some in functional medicine, some in internal medicine, some in family practice, some genetics experts, a clinical pathologist, these things. And we have a full lab, a CLIA-approved lab, and compounding pharmacy, and a lot of very sophisticated diagnostic equipment, including a full genome sequencer, so we can do a full body genome, a full human genome sequence, for lack of a better term. And the goal is in just a few years to really replicate and understand a lot of things that Dave is doing at his lab. And also what Peter Diamandis is talking about. He just wrote a book called Life Force with Tony Robbins and Dave Asprey and a lot of the other people that are very interested in this field. We'll at some point probably start manufacturing exosomes or stem cells, and then trying to figure out ways that they could actually be used in experiments to see if there's actually something there. I think stem cells and exosomes are part of the question, but they require the instruction set. It's kind of like having Lego bricks around. You need somebody to still build the Lego in order for the Lego to be useful. Are you considering a run for president in 2024? Absolutely not. You know, we still love you, right? Yeah, I know you guys do. I still love you guys. Charles, what are your thoughts on the U.S. keeping billions of dollars that belongs to Afghanistan? Maybe when the Taliban government stops murdering women and indiscriminately shooting translators, we can talk about returning alleged property that belongs to them. You know, it's very easy to pick on the United States and call us the big boogeyman. And we sure as hell have done a lot wrong in the world. But every now and then it turns out that maybe there's other people that do things wrong too. And I don't really have a lot of patience or tolerance for theocracies. Dave Asprey's appearance on Joe Rogan podcast was deleted? Really? I didn't know about that. I like Asprey. What's going on with him? Anybody got a problem with him? Charles. Booty. Come on, guys. That's where the action is. The question that's been answered a dozen times and a movie's being made about, and you ask me again. I've certainly told my side of the story many, many times. It's a closed issue. Charles, you should be on Joe Rogan's podcast. It'd be an interesting conversation. You know, I probably will after the thylacine comes back. You know, I've been thinking, I said Rogan after Gogan, but there's a large backlog of things that still need to be done. He lied on Rogan. What did Asprey lie about? I don't know this story. I've read his books and everything, and like Bulletproof Coffee is the shit. What's going on? Guys are bringing me up to speed, man. Do you have a favorite species of fish? I really do like koi fish. They live a very long time, and they're quite friendly. You can feed them every day and say, "Who's your big fish?" Bullet coffee is the shit. You can make your own too. You just take some MCT, you take some butter like Kerrygold unsalted, put that shit together in a blender, make it up, boom, got some bulletproof coffee. You probably, if you haven't done it before, should take some keto digestion drugs. Fat can be quite upsetting into the tummy. Ha ha! Ha ha ha! This is a good dad joke. I'm going to steal it. Charles, did you see the public service announcement for dried grapes? It's all about raising awareness. That's good. Are we in a simulation? Nick Bostrom believes so. It was about the coffee. Apparently, he stated some disingenuous statements from what I understand. Really? And his episode was deleted over coffee? Like, what did he say? Guys, I'm like learning real time with you. Has Cardano reached the final stage of its roadmap? I wish an answer to my question. And the answer is no. There's Basho and Voltaire for the 2020 roadmap. And then there will be the 2027 roadmap. New roadmap. And you guys get to vote on that. Decide if that's what you want. Have you ever done mushrooms or LSD? This is an interesting question. There's a good documentary that's coming out called How to Change Your Mind. It's based on a book that I read years ago from Michael Pollan with the same title. And long and short is that usually what mushrooms, LSD do is they reset what's called the default mode network. It's an area of your brain. And it's something that as you get older tends to be a little ossified, and you start developing pattern recognition. So everything becomes autopilot-y. So when you have kids, they're fucking fascinated with everything. You're like, just everything is amazing to them. And you're an adult, you just brush your teeth, you don't even remember. You drive, you don't even remember. Your life is on autopilot. And your perception of reality, your belief structures, all of these things tend to be there. So what these things do is they scramble that and they reset it effectively. Or so we've been told. To a point where you have that childlike enthusiasm again, and all those walls, those ego, that fades away momentarily. And for many people, it's a deeply transformative experience. Now, what's being researched right now is how to replicate these effects without necessarily using pharmaceuticals. So you can actually Google this. There's been some studies done recently of using virtual reality to replicate a psychedelic experience. And they've had some success with that. The Neuromeditation Institute also has been looking at things like transcranial electric stimulation, so neural feedback, to actually knock the mind with the meditation into a psychedelic state as well, where you've reset the default mode network. So there's many roads to Rome. Go up, go down, still Rome in that respect. And set and setting are very important. So I'd highly encourage you to watch the documentary or to read the book that Michael Pollan wrote. Lovely, lovely book, and look at a boatload of the research that's there. But think about that. How cool is that a VR experience could actually cause a psychedelic trip? And let me see if I can find the company real cool. Sober healing potential. And there's actually a company that's been looking at this. Yeah, VR is as good as psychedelics. So here's the technology review article from MIT. How about that? All you Algorand fans, you now have something to love. Psychedelics transcend. So that's the link right there. And you guys can type it in or just look for it. But actually, there's a company here. And let me grab the company. 75 participants. My VR trip. Yay. PhD candidate. Far from settled. Anuma. Yeah. Yeah, and so here's the VR company that's looking into this. Boom. Pretty cool stuff, huh? Wernus, and Fantastic Fungi on Netflix. Yeah, it finally arrived. I did, didn't I? Ever worked with Gabe Newell? No, but I think he's been on my chat. Is a quantum-resistant Cardano on the roadmap like QRL, quantum-resistant ledger? No, and there's a very good reason for that. So in the original roadmap, we did look at quantum resistance, and there were 3 reasons why we decided not to pursue it. One was that NIST at the time had not standardized the quantum protocols, the quantum-resistant protocols. So it was entirely possible that we'd pick an algorithm that NIST decided not to pick. The whole industry would move differently, and then that would go wildly out of date. 2, many of the protocols are not optimized, so they're really slow. The key sizes are huge, And the corollary is also that they haven't had robust security analysis. So while they have interesting proofs and approaches, because the mathematical complexity is higher and the overhead's higher, there are potentially many, many, many more attack vectors. And three, the protocols have yet to be translated for all the next generation cryptography, like VRFs, zero knowledge proofs, all these things that you guys love and you want to have, like recursive snarks and these things. For the most part, post-quantum crypto has yet to enter that space at scale. And the places where it's entered, it's mostly theoretical, mostly untested, and usually takes a performance hit of 10 to 100x in terms of key size, validation, efficiency, proof size, et cetera, et cetera. So we said, boy, that's tough. And it made much more sense to say, wait another 5 years, because quantum computers are not a reality today at scale. We have plenty of time to go in and add new capabilities to basically slowly introduce quantum resistance, like a post-quantum VRF, some modeling of a quantum adversary for consensus and putting some additional functions and features to protect that, and eventually post-quantum signature schemes and potentially some upgrades to the hashing algorithms. Charles, when Hydra, thanks. There is a public roadmap for the open source Hydra project. They're chipping away at it, and every few weeks they have a release. Encourage you to check it out on GitHub. Charles, what's your take on the impact Tesla's Optimus robot may or may not have? Love you, buddy. I think it's so cool. 150 pounds of joy. It's a really powerful robot. It's got a lot of cool AI features, and also it has all the computer vision stuff that comes from the cars. It's a great platform, and I think within a 10 to 20-year period, it will usher the dawn of pseudo-consumer robotics. So the robot will become the car of the future. I would love, absolutely love, to have 5 or 10 of these things if they actually work at scale and they can do labor. Because just my ranch, for example, I got 11,000 acres, and it's just ton and ton of forest land. And you live nearby a town of 3,500 people. It's damn near impossible to find laborers and workers, and you have to bring them up, pay them $50, $75 an hour in some cases to go and do arborist work or other things. And it's just endless, the work that's there. So it makes a lot of sense if I had Optimus-like robots that were capable of doing these things to just have them do menial tasks, keep the roads clear, clear out brush, do some of the arborist work, plant trees, landscaping considerations, these types of things, surveillance, anti-poaching, all kinds of stuff like that. So I'm very excited about it long term, but I think it's going to take probably 5 to 10 years to hit mainstream. Charles, when are you going to get a On the Best of the Worst with Red Letter Media? Oh my God. I love that show. Mr. Plinkett, number 2. Hello from South Korea. Good to see you. This is like a modern day Buddhist cone. Why is pizza round, delivered in a square box, and served in triangles? Triangles make sense because those lines are equal distance from the center point of the circle. And so that's the only way you can cut it and have equal portions for people. So that one makes sense. The circle for the pizza comes because the original pizzas were actually made by soldiers on their shields, and they had circular shields many, many years ago. And delivered in a square box, it's really hard in rectangular rooms to have boxes in storage that are circular. You certainly get more space efficiency on the pizza box But then think of a stack of them in a corner. It's not going to fit in the corner. So you have to have it square. Charles, what are your thoughts on the importance of systems literacy in education? Model building and systems literacy, 100%, Andrew. I completely agree with you. It's pretty damn sad that we're underappreciated there. I'd recommend you guys read up on Scott Page, his model thinking course, and it just change your mind about the power of this. And that's just models, and systems is a whole ballpark unto itself. How was the video shoot with Champ? It was a heck of a lot of fun. And Champ was a very gracious guy, him and his entourage. And I really enjoyed spending time with them, meeting them. We got a lot done. He's a cool dude. Got to try out my night vision and drove the Sherp. Charles, can I come in and straight up your office? It's a little untidy and my OCD is kicking in full steam. It's like Jordan Peterson. It's like, gotta make your bed. Oh my God, he doesn't make his bed. Have you ever tried a sensory isolation tank? I own a sensory isolation tank. Charles, the article about chemical in the rain that you share on Twitter, forever chemicals, very, very bad. It's actually one of the worst problems right now. And I think it's the cause of the loss of male fertility. And they stick around forever. We rarely talk about them. When will you and Sean Ford ride off into the sunset on horseback? Is that like a proposal? Is Sean going to ask me? Is he going to email me and say, Charles, I just can't stop these feelings. I need you. Charles, do you see yourself ever making another blockchain after Cardano is finished? Well, first, Cardano will never be finished. Second, if it's a sidechain of Cardano, sure. It'd be fun to build some dApps and sidechains. That'd be great. What is the picture you posted on Twitter a while back that had 21 dots? Justin, you're going to have to post a link to that, and I will take a look at it and let you know. What are your thoughts on the FDA and all the food additives in the U.S. compared to other countries? It's killing us. Charles, how's your relationship with Ergo thus far? You and Alex are geniuses. Love Alex. Love Ergo. They're great people. Charles, do you feel like we have too many people on the planet? Do you think as animals we are living outside our means? I think if the systems are right, you can sustain populations much higher than the way the Earth works right now. Warhammer 40K universe has this idea of a hive city. So plenty of things we could do. The problem is that you have to start with fundamentals. Energy, most fundamental thing. We should have a geothermal and nuclear backbone for the world and then build a distributed power grid with solar, mostly solar shingles, and build a big global collaboration where all the governments get together, chip in some money, the corporations get together, chip in some money, and go and build us graphene-like batteries, next generation battery technology. You do that, in 25 years, you've solved the energy crisis. Fourth generation nuclear power, it's here, it's ready to go. They're building one of these plants in Wyoming. And then the next generation beyond that will be fusion, ready to go for the second half of the 21st century. And geothermal, its time has come with EGS. These things together, no power concerns, you have unlimited power. And then if you have energy, then you go and do vertical hydroponic farming. And then suddenly you can grow significantly more plants with the same level of farmland. So you can support a much larger population. Now, you'll have to have higher population density in certain areas. And that's okay. But for the most part, you don't necessarily have to destroy the environment. You just have to have 7 generations thinking. Each person born has to be in a position where they think about what will the actions they take impact somebody 7 generations away. And if you have that, you can sustain as many people as you want because people will behave accordingly. So you need a systems level change in the way that people think and people value things. So capitalism has to be updated a little bit for that. Not in a scary communist way. You just tweak the parameters, create multiple currencies, and incentivize things differently. We do that in the cryptocurrency space. ADA incentivizes its own maintenance. There are SPOs and catalyst participants, and you, the community, are incentivized to take care of this decentralized organism that lives in the cloud. No matter what happens to the stewards that initiated it, you guys are paid by that system to keep it alive. That's a different currency. So why couldn't you replicate these thinking and these concepts to keep nature alive, create biodiversity, improve the environment, instead of harm the environment in that respect? So the short answer to your question is no, if we have the right systems in place and the right thought process in place and the right energy policy in place. Do you fear becoming Oppenheimer? P.S. I love your work and Cardano. No. Maybe with some of the work that we're doing in synthetic biology, but not with cryptocurrencies. Will AGI Singularity and transhumanism occur in the next 25 years? You know, when I was younger, I was big in the transhumanist movement, the whole H plus movement, and there's still a lot of people floating around there. And to me, it always felt like a really cool, vibrant movement. And there were a lot of great thinkers inside of it because they were asking a very simple question. What if you can upgrade the hardware? What would you do? Where would you take that? What does that mean? So everything else in life, cars, computers, farming, houses, we live for the upgrade. Consumerism and capitalism has trained us to not be content with version 1. So we do version 2 and version 3 and version 4 and version 5. But somehow we're told, well, you know, nature's given you just this body and you just have to accept it. What we've discovered through scientific inquiry and deep inner reflection is the body that we're given is not good for us. And when I say not good, meaning it wasn't designed to maximize our personal happiness, our personal utility, our meaning. It was designed in a collective sense to protect it and survive and thrive in different environments that we happen to have evolved into. And whether we're happy or not, our life is quality and everything's great or not, has very little bearing on that flesh bag that we have. So this is reflected in the fact that some people have dysmorphias or mental illnesses. This is reflected in the fact that some people are born with congenital defects. This is reflected in the fact that depression is a huge issue in the human race. Huge issue. And for the people who suffer from it, it's devastating. It's worse than many cases being shot. It is just as destructive. So the promise of transhumanism is basically saying through genetic modification and cybernetic augmentation and just good old-fashioned good medicine and good understanding of how our bodies work, we can hack ourselves in a certain way to either give ourselves new capabilities or to correct deficiencies of evolution. For example, I just read the other day that they were playing with human cells, and they actually managed to take an octopus camouflage and put it into a human cell. So some species of octopus have the ability, when they're sitting next to something, to change the color of their body like a chameleon does and look like that thing. So they become functionally invisible. And there's super cool videos on YouTube showing that. Well, what if you had the ability, just sitting in a black chair like this, your skin can change. Sit next to another thing, your skin can change. It really does change the whole racial debate. If you can change the color of your skin at will, doesn't it? Things get a little different. The way we view people would be very different. It's the same when we talk about other capabilities. Like, I'm very interested in anti-aging. If you look at salamanders or other animals that are like them, they have these amazing, like axolotls, they have these amazing abilities to regenerate. You can chop off an arm and a new arm grows. Well, what if humans have that amazing ability? What if we could genetically modify ourselves to live long periods of time and rejuvenate ourselves on a regular basis? What if we could find a way to fly? These types of things. What would that do to society and culture? There's also equity issues here in that, what if that's not evenly distributed? Like, the hyper wealthy, like myself, have first access to it and normal people don't. And so the difference between the wealthy and the poor is not just arbitrary pieces of paper. It's now, evolutionarily speaking, you're a different species. Homo supremus. You're just Homo optimus. Homo. Chatus. This, like, the basically have genetic advantages, massive biological advantages. So that means your productivity, your intelligence, your capability to compete is better. So actually, the rich get richer at a much accelerated pace. So the difference between the haves and the have-nots gets very big in that respect. You eventually have these cybernetic transhumanist overlords that rule over Earth. Not so good. So that, plus the AI component of this idea of extended cognition, or maybe this fleshy brain bag that we have, we can extend our thinking outward into it. For example, when you look at a lot of neuroscience, they say, hey, when you hold devices or you go places, your brain starts treating these things as an extension of yourself, like when you ride a bicycle or something like that. If you do it enough, the brain starts wiring itself in a way that it starts thinking the bicycle is indeed part of you. It's really creepy. So you start interacting with computers, maybe you can actually move your consciousness or your awareness from just your body to another system. I don't know. Who the fuck knows how consciousness works? There's some crazy stuff from Roger Penrose on it. So transhumanism also brings the perspective of this idea of us going from I to we. So instead of just being a person, you could be a node in a collective of cognition. Think about how different the world would be if, when you try to understand somebody, you can literally plug into their brain and they can plug into your brain, kind of like a Vulcan mind meld. And then collectively, how much different would society be if we had these capabilities? And people are looking into this. That's functionally what Neuralink is doing in open water. And these other companies are drilling holes in the skulls and putting wires in so that you can read and write, and then eventually brains can communicate with each other. So that's another big component of transhumanism, not just the modification of the organism, but the linking of the organisms to create a meta-organism, a collective consciousness in this respect, which will fundamentally change the notion of what it means to be human in that respect. That's creepy as fuck. It is pretty creepy. Anytime you change is creepy. But then again, probably a lot of the things that we do today are probably super creepy to an ancient human. I don't know. It's something we all have to live with and think about. Boy, that'd create more empathy. Yeah, it would, wouldn't it? Well, actually, no. The poor will not work as servo skulls. They'll start as servitors, and only the fortunate, honored servitors will become the servo skulls. How this works, people. Hope is the first step on the road to disappointment. How can a guy that makes some computer software for free get arrested? The same way you can get arrested for writing a book that's inconvenient to somebody. How cool was it? Was the "It's a scam! It's a scam" remix? Well, I just like to say I just loved winning the scammies. Thank you, Tone Vase. It was truly an honor. Really enjoyed it. What is your favorite Warhammer faction? Well, obviously, it's the Space Marines. Come on. I shorted the fuck out of Ada. Okay, good for you, Matthew Goodacre. Good for you. Thank you for letting us know. Can you put on one of your masks? I've been wearing masks for 2 years now. Nah. Take me a little time. Do you like Minsk and Boo? Yeah, he has good characters. Probably in the original Baldur's Gate, I'd say, who would be my favorite in the original Baldur's Gate? I mean, TX was just amazing as an NPC. TX rules. Just a lot of fun. Actually, quite powerful. In the second Baldur's Gate, Minx took a larger role than in the first one. Was one of the essential tanks to have. Aerie, the cleric wizard, was a very powerful character as well. Great love story too. What's your favorite video game of all time? I think of all time that had the most influence on me, Baldur's Gate 2. But that's a hard one because I've played so many. Water bears, Charles. Talk about the water bears. I'm sorry, the story is unbearable. Have you heard of Skinwalker Ranch? And if so, do you think think is going on down there? I'm probably going to go visit it. I got a connection through the Colossal guys to Skinwalker. So one of these days we're going to go and hang out, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Lex Friedman in the house, yo. Lex is in the house. Where'd Lex go? I didn't see the comment. Hey, Lex. I was talking about transhumanism there for a little bit, having fun. Proof of stake. How long is Silas Simon? Well, if you're in the house, please do ask a question. There's that heart I look for. I absolutely love the John Carmack interview. I loved his explanation of his relationship with John Romero, which was great. Thank you for asking that question. And it was a lot of fun also to hear him talk about engineering and his time at IDSoft. All around, just fun. Very, very fun. You've been knocking out of the park lately. There's been some phenomenal episodes. I just saw the Jordan Peterson one pop up, and I can't wait to watch that as well. Actually, I have an AI venture that I'm thinking about doing that involves chatbots, and it was inspired by your interview that you did with what's her name about Replica, the AI companion. Oh yeah, the CIA one was brilliant as well. That was a really fun episode. Yeah, he's probably since Joe left YouTube and went to Spotify. I think Lex has become the dominant YouTube podcast. I don't even listen to Joe Rogan anymore. Yeah, replica is really an interesting concept. If you look at how GPT is evolving and you look at how quickly people are integrating AI into all the things that they do, it probably stands to reason that you're going to have a human like experience with something like replica in a 5 to 10 year horizon. So that old classical Turing test may actually work its way through. But it brings a lot of interesting things into like a metaverse play and an NFT play, because you say, okay, well, what are you going to do with this chatbot that you functionally trained up to be like Joy from Blade Runner 2049? Well, you want to own it. You want to have agency for it. You want to interact with it in a more interesting and material way. So, I can entirely imagine that the service would allow you to create it as an NFT and then import that into a metaverse and then interact with it through some form of a VR experience. For me, it's much more interesting to say, well, how can you use these things as facilitators for human connection and relationships? So it would be so cool if you had a service that took a chatbot, it talked to a person, got to know that person, another chatbot talks to a person, gets to know that person, and then those two do the matching and connect people together. And I frankly think Replica is in a perfect position to facilitate this. And then if this is done just the right way, you could basically have any type of connection you want, professional connections, friendship connections, and relationships. And you can integrate into the chatbots a lot of Sentinel code to understand if people are adversarial in their relationships or communication. Like, for example, you could use FBI interrogation techniques to see if people are kind of lying in the way that they communicate. And over an arc of time, they tend to catch themselves a little bit. You put Myers-Briggs personality tests. You put all kinds of things to actually get dense data. But if you're clever, the chatbot can disguise that in the auspices of normal communication. So you get much better matching algorithms, much better matching capabilities with these things. Now, if you combine that with some privacy-preserving crypto, it's entirely possible that the majority of this stuff is collected and run client side and never sent to a server or possessed by a third party. So I think you can actually balance the nature of basically the need for privacy with the desire for connectivity in that respect. So maybe the time has come that like AI assisted relationships are the way to go. The other thing is that when we make a profile about ourselves, we tend to lie a little bit. Everybody puts their best foot forward. But when you get to know somebody and they really get to know you, they develop a more realistic opinion than anything you'd ever be able to say. So if the matching was done by a non-human for connecting people and it's done by an objective agent that has the ability to drill down a little bit, it just feels like it'd be better. But it'd be fun to do an AI venture in this respect and find a way to connect these types of things. I think it's one of those things that is going to be done in 3 to 5 years. And I just looking at the trajectory of how quickly chatbots are evolving and how quickly AI is evolving, it's just remarkable. Optimus is going to require human level interaction. So there's a whole incentive for that. And then when you look at Google Tensor, every generation these chips come out, all the interactions that they're having, all the training from those human interactions these chips have, it really is evolving at a rate where I think you will get that natural human interaction that we've been striving for forever in artificial intelligence. And then once you have it, people trust it, they empathize with it, they connect to it, and eventually will fall in love with it and so forth. So that's pretty cool stuff. You ever get sick of having to defend yourself, your life's work, Cardano, to the people who ride the hype train and have no idea about anything? Well, that's a less evolved Charles Hoskinson would agree to that type of thing. At the end of the day, every criticism has buried within it a kernel of truth. If it didn't, it's not a criticism, it's fantasy. Like if somebody comes up to me and says, "You are the worst wizard in Tolkien's stories." What the fuck does that mean? It's like, I'm not a wizard. I'm not in Tolkien's stories. I have nothing to do with that universe, so it has no emotional reaction. When somebody comes up to you and says you've lied about this, or you are incompetent, or you're incapable, they have a personal criticism about an event that you are connected to, then it makes you enter into a cycle of self-doubt and reflection if you're sane. And you basically go through these emotions of anger and doubt and rage and justification and so forth. And if you're not careful, the entire game becomes proving this person is wrong who levied the criticism. What you need to do is steelman it and say, well, what if, let's play the what if game. They're right. What if what they've said is entirely true? And we look at the criticism of Cardano, to steelman the criticism, there's a lot there that's valid. The choice of Haskell, the choice of peer review, the launch of Cardano, the fact that no VCs were involved and it was done in a very democratic way, making a high priority out of decentralization, less accessible developer experience. These are all fair criticisms, and they have to be, because you take a risk doing it on the other side. And if it turns out it's right, in hindsight, it seems obvious, but at the time, it's a risk. Remember, Microsoft was one of hundreds of software companies that were founded in the 1970s. The vast majority of the ones founded at the time Microsoft was founded are now out of business. They were out of business in the mid-'80s. So all of them, some were larger, Lotus was larger, are not here anymore. They're gone because they chose poorly. But at the time, it seemed like they chose wisely, and Microsoft was the one choosing poorly. Just to give you a sense of this, when IBM came to Microsoft and said, hey guys, we want you to write an operating system, they passed on the deal. They said, no, we don't do that, but we know these guys over here, they're going to do a great job for you. They went over there, and those guys, they didn't want to sign the NDA. And they come back to Microsoft angry and say, those guys you referred us to was a waste of time. Bill's, I'll do it for you. He went over to Paul. He's like, we write programming languages. How the fuck do we write an operating system? And Paul Allen's like, don't worry, I know a guy. We can buy it from him. You see, they had no fantasy of Windows back then. And now it's like obvious in the history of Microsoft in that respect. So we made a lot of risky choices as a community. And I did my best to kind of balance all of the different needs and trade-offs and so forth. And right now, real time, we're living the criticism and we're living the fruits of our labors. We know we've made a difference and we know we've changed things and so forth. Personal criticism of me, very valuable. Haven't always been the nicest person, the most mature person, haven't always been the best person in life. And the difference between you and me is that my grievances, the issues with me, are aired more publicly. But they exist on both sides. All I have agency over is to ask what wisdom can be gained from the criticism and have enough self-awareness to say, tomorrow, be a little better, be a little bit more patient, be a little smarter, be a little bit more capable, have a little bit more love in one's heart. Because at the end of the day, that's all I have agency over. That's all I have control over and so forth. And be willing to admit that maybe your ideas are wrong. And be willing to admit that maybe some of the approaches and processes that you followed are wrong. Some of your conceptions about how the world works are wrong. The brightest people, the wisest people, the most capable people are the people who have capacity for radical change quickly when the time demands it. And those often are the most effective people in any organization. The people who are static and dogged and very fundamentalist in the way that they approach things. They seldom get anything done because at the end of the day, they've dug their heels in, and that's that. There's no room for debate. It's why I hate Bitcoin maximalism so much. They said the world ended January 3rd, 2009. There is no room for anything else other than the doctrine we have given, which we shall occasionally, through a papal bull or conclave, update a little bit. We'll change a word here and there. But for the most part, it's perfect. How boring is that? How sad is it that all progress ends on a day, and we no longer have the right to evolve. It's almost like Dr. Ford's speech in Westworld to Bernard, when he said all of human evolution was constructed through a mistake. And if we stop making them, then we're as good as it gets. That's the sadness of it. So it's a mixed bag. If you pay too much attention to it, you become neurotic and broken and mired in self-doubt. If you ignore it, you have no ability to improve yourself. So you have to find the right balance between the two. See what else we got here. Looking at some interesting questions. Maybe. Come on. Is it hard being Charles sometimes? Do you feel more evolved than in previous years? I feel more aware of how open and vast the world is, and as a result, how much smaller I am. And if you're gaining wisdom, you're admitting less knowledge, and you're admitting that you are less relevant in a certain respect. However, paradoxically, at the same time, you grow in relevance. It's a hard thing getting old. You know, when I started in this industry, I had 4 grandparents. 3 are dead now, and I have 1 left who's in his 90s and probably not going to last much longer. Dad's a lot older. Family's a lot older. Things have changed. Been through a lot personally. And there's a lot more white in the beard than there used to be. And I suppose that shared experience, going through that, watching others go through that, has indeed changed me and grown me. And it's left me with a desire to do better and be better. And it makes me jealous of having a lack of time. You know, I'm in a position where I have access to some of the best people in the world for self-improvement, whether it be physical exercise, mental exercise, and I've access to the best therapies, hyperbaric therapies, neural stimulation, the drug of the week. You know, I can get anything I need. And really the limiting factor is the commitment and time to get into it. Learn anything I want to learn. I have a formal institute of mathematics, for God's sakes, the Hoskinson Center for Formal Mathematics. I could spend the next 10 years doing nothing but automated theorem proving and just spending every day proving interesting things. If I really cared to do that, why not? Time. So it's strange to be in a position where I could do anything but not everything. Not many people can say either, but I can for that. And so then the question is, how do you spend it wisely? And then it makes you kind of hesitant to invest and commit. And I find myself cutting commitments these days as opposed to embracing them outside of things that are longstanding passions. For example, some video games I want to develop, or the anti-aging clinic, or bioluminescent plants. These are things that I want to do for a very long time. But even there, I take less of a leadership role. In my biotech company, my brother basically runs the day-to-day operations of it. Others, I'm hiring CEOs to run those companies, and I give them a creative input. And I just watch it evolve and grow. And I'm trying to take back my time in a certain respect, because I really would like to focus in on those parts of anything that really mean the most. Why haven't you bought a zero gravity chair yet? I do have one. It's in one of my houses. Why wasn't Ethereum on proof of stake from the beginning? Because launching proof of stake is super fucking hard. Super hard. And it took us a few years and a lot of effort to get it to a point where we felt pretty comfortable with it. And Ethereum had even more difficulty because they were trying to solve multiple problems at the same time. It looks like they've converged to something. And I'm pretty confident that they will have proof of stake in market soon. It won't be the end all be all. It's going to take a long time for them to achieve scale. And you'll see that with our input endorser specification. But it's not easy. You ever been to Japan? If so, what's your favorite spot? I used to live in Osaka, and I was very, very happy to go to Nara whenever I had the opportunity. It was one of my favorite places to go. Are you secretly sad that you're losing control over Cardano? I'm very happy that Cardano is growing up as a project. Take care. Good night, Charles. Well, good night, Abraham Benson Roofing. How do you address Maxi saying proof of stake is never as secure as proof of work? There's people who believe the earth is flat. Do you argue with them? No, you don't. You don't argue with them at all. Arguing with a proof of work maximalist is like playing chess with a chicken. It's going to knock all the pieces down on the board, shit all over it, and strut like it's won. Gen 4 is Charles in. Yes, sir. We actually are coming up with a 4th generation cryptocurrency idea. We're getting there. Oh, multi-resource consensus, ubiquitous inclusive accountability, a broad sidechain infrastructure, post-quantum, all kinds of shit. There's some good stuff there. Good stuff. Please go on the Lex Friedman podcast again. Well, if Lex has me back, I don't know. I was probably pretty boring the first time. Be fun to go back though. But I have to wait until there's more interesting things to say. As a former Ethereum developer, curious to know if you think the merge will happen next month as predicted. More likely than not, probably will. Why don't you do AMAs more often recently? I've been insanely busy. I run 4 companies. Please tell us about Planescape Torment. You play a blue dude who wakes up in a mortuary, and then your best friend turns out to be a floating skull that's actually probably an aspect of Merkel. And you go on this amazing adventure to try to discover who you are and why, when you die, you can't die, that you just kind of wake back up in the mortuary and life continues. So turns out that you're called the Nameless One and that you did some really horrible, fucked up shit. And that's why you lost your name. And different versions of yourself were basically chasing this. And then you have to go and rediscover your ancient crimes and your true identity throughout the game. It's one of the best written games, and it's probably one of the most interesting games ever built with the Infinity Engine, which is the same engine that powers Icewind Dale and Baldur's Gate. I think there's probably over 1,000 pages of dialogue in Planescape Torment, and there's really probably never going to be a game quite like it again. It was out there and it was magical, and I'd highly recommend picking up the enhanced edition from, I think, Beamdog Studios released it. Very, very, very good game. Pretty magical. Makes you think. I've read the book Ender's Game from Orson Scott Card. Yes. Actually, he wrote a lovely book on writing as well, Characters and Viewpoint. Thoughts on Kimball, Musk, and Square Roots? Actually, Kimball and I were going to have lunch one of these days. I ran into him at Consensus. He's a really good guy. He makes these beautiful gardens that he gives to schools, and children learn how to garden. Charles, don't you think Cardano needs new leaders to advance? Yeah, you should become one. Go do it. It's your network as much as it is mine. Nico, what's the impact of proof of useful work on Cardano? None right now, but it certainly could be if we were a 4th generation cryptocurrency. Charles, if you were a woman, I'd marry you. Well, thank you, Paul. Exit only, Paul. Charles, I'm a steel mill worker from Pittsburgh and all in Ada. Free time. Love the Hoskinson Center you put at CMU. Can I buy you a Primani sandwich next time you come in? Absolutely, Jacob. Absolutely. I'll tweet it. If you're in the area, come on over. Define useful. We have very specific mathematical definition. Waksat. Plenty of problems are isomorphic to that. Cardano is losing his goodwill and trust. How can you be so irresponsible? Because of it, we have lost all the money. How so? Because crypto market go down, crypto market go up, go down, go up. It's like let me show you. Let me show you how it works. Genkari. Okay. I learned this from a movie. Wax on, wax off. Ready? Ready? One more time. Wax on, wax off. You see? Mark it up, mark it down, mark it up, mark it down. Levity aside, every metric looks great. The problem is that the macro is collapsing because the markets was in a bubble and it comes down. Welcome to crypto. It does that. It's done it 6 times. When I've been in the market, goes up, goes down. You have a wax on and you have a wax off. That's crypto in a nutshell. You know, and have to clear Luna, have to clear Celsius, have to clear all these things. Is that my fault? No. It's the market. Charles, could you ever see a hybrid proof of work, proof of stake project? Yes, I've been in the space long enough to remember Peercoin, which was the first. Good old Sonny. What do you think about having more than one node client? I couldn't agree more. We need a polyglot culture. You guys, you do need one. Let's do it. Open source project. How about that? When can we see you again with Maria Bartoma on Fox Business News? It was great to see you on the national stage. Awesome interview to reach a broader audience. It was a lot of fun. She's a wonderful person, and I really have a lot of fun on our show. So I'll keep coming on as long as they have me. Charles, can you shout me out, man? You got me through my depression. Well, Antonio, here's to you. Seriously, though, Planescape Torment sounds rad. Why aren't people making video games like that anymore? Well, it starts because the internet ruined it. Red letter media aside. The thing is that they are. Just the density of video games has increased enormously, and there's many games that have come out in recent memory that have rich, intricate plots. The problem is that if you have to balance the reality of certain gameplay mechanics with the desire to tell a story. So, Planescape Torment, it's an open world in a certain respect, but it's not. You have well-defined maps, you have a well-defined plot, you have a direction and a decision tree for the player to go on, but ultimately there's a finite amount of endings that are fully enumerated, and it's just a rich, vibrant story. And the person is playing it as much for the story as they are the gameplay mechanics. So, yes, you have to overcome things and win certain battles and these types of things, but ultimately you're playing to find out what happens and what influence you have over the world in which these things happen. Another game that I absolutely loved was Arcanum. It came from Troika Games, and there it was just an extraordinary open world Victorian steampunk world that had a hybrid of magic and technology. Phenomenal game. Absolutely phenomenal. And I always thought to myself, why can there not be a sequel? But there's all kinds of creative new things that are coming out all the time. New games, Event Zero, for example, where you actually have like real conversations with a computer terminal and try to figure out how to convince it to help you get home. There's really cool sandbox games that have come out. There's mega AAA studio games like Red Dead Redemption 2, and things like the newest Elder Scrolls that's coming out, which are obviously huge. They have an amazing, like, your protagonist getting tuberculosis and dying in the game. Spoiler alert. Pretty amazing, right? So, these things still do exist, but the problem is the gameplay mechanics are so involved, and the graphics are so involved, and the combinatorial explosion of the decision tree is so involved. It really is an extremely involved affair, and it costs $50 to $100 million to make a AAA game, where it used to cost $5 million to make a game in that category. And it's only getting more and more involved in that respect. So there will be more like Planescape Torment, and people will make them. Maybe I will, but they're still doing it. Don't give up hope. What was your favorite cartoon? Well, obviously Rick and Morty. Are you worried about BlackRock buying 51%? Well, yeah, they can buy 51% of the ADA supply. And then we can maybe do an airdrop to a different chain. It's the no homers chain. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Shout out to Arthur Morgan. Have you ever played Diablo 2? Well, fucking yeah, I played Diablo 2. Even Diablo 2 Resurrected. Come on now, son. Come on now. Will there be an Ada burn, please? No, but there's certainly an abundance of paint chips. The question I get. When Legends of Valor? Finally a guy's paying attention. Finally. Not even working on it right now. Do you like old fashions? Diablo 2 was indeed addictive. It was a dopamine factory. It's a dopamine. It's a dopamine. Proof of useful work on Ethereum Classic. Well, it would have been a lot of fun to bring it to Ethereum Classic. I'm not bitter at all. The value we could have brought. Oh, well. Speed reading test, 81% complete. Got to be fast. Got to be fast. Wouldn't be prudent. Bro, you still talking? Bro, you still listening? That says a lot more about you than me. Just says I have no life. What's it say about you? Charles, what's your opinion on seed oils? Seed oils. I've read a lot, heard a lot that people seem to feel that they're poison and they're killing you from the inside out. That comes a lot from the keto and paleo community. And unfortunately, there's just not enough research to know either way. But there does seem to be a direct correlation to the introduction of seed oils wholesale into our diets and the proliferation of obesity, diabetes, and lifestyle diseases. So there's a really interesting trend line that you can construct there, and there's a very strong correlation with it. Somehow Ansel Keys seems to think that fat is responsible for that. We all had high-fat diets before and didn't have the heart disease and the diabetes and so forth. But we did introduce that and smoking and refined sugars into our diet. Don't know about that. But I'm not a nutritionist. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I created the clinic that I have, is that I can actually take nutritional information, data, hypotheses, and run the experiment. We can go find morbidly obese people that metabolically are just destroyed and have high levels of insulin sensitivity, and fix them, and then see what worked for them, and then do the pre and post labs and see what's the best way of doing it. I think there's a genetic component to nutrition. I also do believe that refined things probably are problematic. So you have to look at that. Charles, you seem like a fun guy. Me and my husband would love to meet you in person one day. For like a pizza in a public place, right? Never go full Bill Gates, though. Well, hang on. Let me see. Yeah, no, I can't do it. Sorry. It's just like, fucking come on, man. You look great for 40. Well, fuck you too. I'm gonna fix all of it, yo. 2 years in, it's gonna be a game changer. I'll be in great shape. I'll have fucking 6-pack abs. I'm gonna go full Giga Chad. Yeah. So is Taiwan part of the United States now? There's a deep and interesting history to this question. And because I don't want to get banned on YouTube, I probably won't talk about that deep and interesting history. Charles, have you ever seen anything you would consider to be paranormal? Oh, absolutely. I've seen some crazy shit. Come on, guys, give me some good questions. Sad you can't say what you want. Well, if I could tell you what I want, what I really, really want, but do you care what I want, what I really, really want? You know how it all ends? Yeah. Bran becomes king. Because who has a better story than Bran? I rewrote the entire ending of Game of Thrones, season 7 and season 8. I was so angry about it that I actually sat down and wrote it out on hand. And one of these days, I will tell you. It takes 30 minutes to tell because it's so intricate and beautiful. But Christ, it was soul destroying. It was just beyond bad. Can I tell my friends I talked to Charles? Well, Blaine, yes, you can. Because you did. I talked to you, so you talked to me. And we're happy together. Are you going to drink that water? Is agua? I suppose I will. Okay, I can drink it normal like this. I can drink it Mark Zuckerberg style. Congressman. Charles, you recommend turn-based combat or real-time combat for Arcanum? Got a little in my lungs. Play Wizard, max out Harm, Dark Necromancy, Black Magic, and get your magic aptitude to 100. Click, 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 click. Everything dies. Charles, a fake intellectual as opposed to real intellectual? I don't know. Shakira is flowing good with Charles today. Well, the hips don't lie. Remember, my style is unblockable. Do you have any reason for always wearing a dress shirt? I do. It hides my man boobs. What's Phil Wadler up to? I miss hearing from him. He's still working on Plutus. He's doing some great work in extended UTXO and Plutus. Oh, that's right. Shakira actually is in some tax trouble. Yeah. Greetings, Charles, from Montevideo, Uruguay. I love that country. It's a beautiful place. Charles, are you Jewish? No. Why so many stake pools? Not upgrade to 135.3? Well, it just kind of came out. It needs to take a little time. You know, they're going to sit down with it. They're going to like have a little campfire, get some s'mores out there. You know, the node will pull out its guitar, start playing a little bit, you know, set the mood. Then all of a sudden they see the stars because the clouds will pull back, and then they'll just start telling stories about their life and, you know, the things they've been through. And then eventually the node and the SPO will lock eyes, and they'll know that they need to be together forever, or until version 135.4 comes out. Why do you insist on attacking your most loyal supporters of Cardano on Twitter? Rah! Do you really think that's true, Ian? You just sit there and you're just like, that's what he's just attacking the most loyal supporters. You really think that's true? That's what's going on. He's just in your mind, just ready for that. Been doing this for about 2 hours now. 1,000 people are watching real time. That's your shot. You're like, that is the question I want to ask. That's the way I want to go. Come on, man. What annoys me is when there's a process for something, and that process works really well, and it's an inclusive process, and it's a productive process, and it protects us as an ecosystem and a community from getting derailed and going off on tangents. And it really helps people get to the heart of the matter. The heart of the matter is that every person wants to upgrade to Vassal, because we all acknowledge that the things in Vassal are good for everybody in this ecosystem. It's great for the SPOs. It's great for the exchanges. It's great for the developers. It's great for the ecosystem. It makes Cardano better. That's our goal. That's our end goal. So the question is, when are we ready to do that? So the first question you ask is, who decides? Does Charles Hoskinson decide? Until this whole incident happened, a lot of people mistakenly believed in the cryptocurrency community that I do. Then we magically discovered that apparently there's this whole other constituency that apparently has a say in the matter, more than I do. So what was happening was that a negotiation was going on between the developers and the stake pool operators, a very healthy negotiation about what they want to see to be comfortable. And lots of people showed up for that. And lots of people were working at it. And ultimately, we're seeing real time who's comfortable and who's not comfortable. Currently, a supermajority of the SPOs are not comfortable. So something needs to happen to make them comfortable. And they told us certain things they'd like to see. Okay. So we, the developers, are now working with them hand in glove to put these pieces together. Now, normal processes and communication, that'd be the end of it. You just keep the iteration going and keep the iteration going and keep it going until eventually it converges, and then suddenly everybody's happy. And when they're happy, we get to our goal, which is Fossil comes out. But what happened is that some people decided in that group to just leave that group and go to different channels and kind of talk about it in a different medium. And they can do that. It's a free country, free speech, whatever. Great. But there's consequences to that. And predictably so, the consequences are that it first doesn't change that dialogue and debate where it's actually happening. It doesn't change the testing. It doesn't change any of the facts on the ground that people are going to check things and do things, because this is not a blind community. They're smart people. They do this all day. SBOs are among our smartest people in the community. They work harder than anybody else. But what it does do is create a very simple headline: Cardano catastrophic bug. That's what sticks. You go ask a person a month, oh yeah, didn't Cardano have a catastrophic bug? Didn't it fail like Solana, or is it dead like Luna? That's what you get when you go to the other medium. And that's the criticism, is why do you do that? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to talk about? Oh, we're just trying to have an open dialogue and inform people. Okay. Why not then just go and invite the podcaster to go and live stream the SPO meeting where there are like tons of SPOs talking to the IO people, and have them get exposed to the intricacies of the Zoom meeting that just happened. They can see real time the dialogue. And then the story is there's a dialogue and people are working and there's checks and balances. Why have only two, no IO representative? Oh, well, you guys didn't show up. Oh, okay. Well, did you ask our media inquiry? Did you go and talk to Tim or Ben O'Hannon? No, because you want a sensationalist headline. And why? Because it gets clicks. You make money. That's the truth. And I'm the guy who calls it out the way I see it. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's the way I see it. And what I'm trying to convey is that this kind of behavior doesn't solve problems. It hurts us as an ecosystem. It's not my call anymore. The days of Charles sitting in an ivory tower cogitating about the magic of things is long over. Okay. All I can do is make sure great code gets written and inform people about things and recommend something. So I did. And some people didn't like the recommendation and said, well, we feel it should be done this way. And there's a channel to discuss that. And ultimately, they make the personal call in that respect. And that's how you get things done. So I don't think I was calling people out or attacking the most loyal supporters of Cardano. I'm reminding people that they're accountable to what they say and the approaches that they follow. Here is the inescapable truth, Ian. The inescapable truth. If I was nicer and better at how I approach things and how I said things, how I treated people, there would be no Lara Shin book. There would be no hatred of Charles Hoskinson in the cryptocurrency space. There are certainly lies and propaganda and misinformation, but some of it is self-inflicted by my approach. Do we want our community going and replicating that for themselves? and then pretending like they've done nothing wrong and playing the victim on Twitter. Oh, there's these evil people. Oh no, there's criticism. I just don't understand it. Well, when you go and you create a headline, Cardano catastrophic bug, the fuck you think is going to happen? It pisses a lot of people off and it causes a lot of harm and damage. Come on, guys, use your mind, use your brain. Think about it. Think about the optics of what you do. Think about what you say. I have to now. Everything I say, I have to think more about it. I used to be able to just go shoot the shit, tell you how I feel, bark at people. And what did that get me? Got me half the space hating me. And they'll hate me for the rest of their lives. I can go cure cancer. They'll be like, it's a scam cure. I'll take my tumors. I don't trust Charles. I mean, that's where we're at. Do you want to live that life? Do you want to go down that road? Do you want to endure that every single day? Come on, think about it. No. So why communicate that way? Follow the process. If it's not effective, the video should be, we were trying to follow the process and it's not working. No one's listening to us. They're just rushing it through and forcing all of us to do something we don't feel comfortable with. But you give it a shot? No. Anyway. And this is another lie. If everyone upgraded like you told them, Cardano would be broken. That's a lie. When the testnet went down, it was 135, and it wasn't 135.2. Actually, it was broken all the way back with 135. Other people didn't catch it. I guess maybe we knew a little bit more about it. There was no upgrade path there, and the hard fork date got pulled, and we just started looking at it and started working with people. So some of the people started upgrading to 135.2 of their own free will, and it was discovered on mainnet that there was an issue, but that was still under test, and we discovered it as well. Okay, so we both discovered it. Great. But now with 135.3, we're in a position where we have confidence in it. And it is running with about 20% of the nodes on mainnet in a mixed node environment. They're able to communicate with each other. They're able to make blocks. And yeah, 135.3 is going to survive a hard fork on the pre-production. So it'll run. And the code that's already survived a hard fork before on 135 will run. So Cardano would not be broken. But this is the lie that was told. Cardano was broken, never got broken, never was even at risk of being broken. Bugs were discovered too late in the process for my comfort, but they were discovered. It's that simple. But you've taken a lie and you've absorbed it. There are checks and balances and layers of testing. There are literally thousands of people, from exchanges to stake pool operators to our QA people to the foundation QA people, that every day wake up and get involved in this. And at some point you stumble on something. And every now and then a fuck up happens, as we saw. And you fix it and you move on. But then if you say, well, we need to test, we have to test, you have to say, okay, well, what are we going to test? And that was that dialogue. Don't you see? That's the system working. It doesn't work. You start the dialogue, and what happens? They start saying, well, actually, maybe this test scenario needs to be done. This test scenario needs to be done. Some people are saying, resurrect the test net. Well, it's broken right now, 135.2. Doesn't work. Yeah, maybe we can find a way to patchwork, get it working again, but what real material value does that provide to getting us to our goal, which is getting Vossel out? It won't give us any more assurance in the software, will it? No. It will just maybe recover some of that history. And that's a parallel effort that should be explored, but for different reasons. Disaster recovery, mitigation of damage, these types of things, better tooling, better discussions about how to spin up test nets. But with the pre-production plan, the thing we outlined and all the communication, you can achieve the same ends of testing a mixed node environment and all kinds of things and demonstrating functionality works. You know, it's that simple. Now, is it perfect? No. But that's the nature of software development. That's the nature of these types of things. And that's the nature of having checks and balances. But you see, you say that, and you don't really know the core of that. That's the issue. You know, and do we have egg on our face? Sure. We wrote the software. So by definition, we're at fault. It's that simple. Buck stops there. Do we fix it? Yeah. Okay. It's not the first bug. Cardano's had dozens of really intricate, unique, weird bugs that could have become very problematic had they persisted. By the way, Bitcoin did too. There was an inflation bug in Bitcoin that would allow you to create Bitcoin out of thin air. Billions of them. Google Bitcoin inflation bug. Happens. You fix it, you move on, and you mitigate the damage. And that's what's been done. And now that dialogue's happening. More testing is being done. And at some point, we'll hit that magic 75% number. Maybe soon, maybe long, because it depends on people's testing preferences. But we'll hit it. And then the countdown begins. And the HFC event is triggered. And we move post-facile. And we go to the next horizon. Now, after that, big post-mortem. We'll talk about why did this slip through and where did the communication break down and these types of things and how do we do better? And then moving forward, certain things will be made more explicit, including the stage upgrade process. And we'll tighten up communication with certain core constituencies. I fully agree it wasn't optimal. That's fine. But the solution is you make it better and you work together in channels, not apart in channels. Why weren't we there in that conversation, that dialogue? Because it served no purpose for the narrative that wanted to be there. We'd have been happy to be there, but we weren't. And it caused damage. That's the umbrage. And that's the thing. That's what you have to think about. Would gathering test conditions from all SPOs ensure better testing? No, it just gets more testing, because reality is that they're going to be running it in different environments, different hardware configurations, different geographies, different latencies, different internet connections, different operating systems, you name it. And the more is better in these types of things. And there are definitely some holes that really do need to be examined. And I'm very interested myself in the postmortem. Because it just felt like we were there and then we weren't. And it's bizarre how that slipped through. And I'm not sure where that came from. And, we looked at everything, we got deeply into it, and people worked really hard to clean it up. And, for the most part, it feels pretty good. And it's important to understand that the vast majority of the code from 135 is untouched, meaning it survived a huge amount of QA again and again and again and again. So, this is just the reality of the fact the system is getting really complicated, which means that it's outgrown its testing harness, and we need a better testing harness and more testing scenarios. Thoughts on continuous glucose monitor. I'll show you guys one of the coolest use cases I've seen with a continuous glucose monitor. So there's a great YouTube channel called What I've Learned. And he actually just released a beautiful video where he did a 7-day fast. So no food, just a fast. And let me post that here. Yeah, so here's the video, and the channel's What I've Learned. So anyway, he wore a continuous glucose monitor while he was fasting and kept a mood journal at the same time. And what was amazing is that the mood journal was actually tracking his blood sugar levels perfectly. So when they went down, his mood went down. When they stabilized, his mood went up. He also tried to balance his salt intake and magnesium, potassium intake with these other things. So I'd highly recommend watching that video, but it's pretty cool. You usually put them under the arm, they go click, and then they give you real-time data for, I think, 2 weeks. You ever play Fallout New Vegas? Yes, sir. Mr. House for the win. He had a vision. Favorite chess player of all time, Nimzowitz. Doctor is going to get a blood sample if you go to the hospital. They can't rely on a CGM. Even if they can't rely on it for clinical applications, you can rely on it for steering applications, because the odds are that while it might be not sensitive or accurate enough for a diagnosis of a disease, it can give you a general direction. It's kind of like a scale. So your scale at home is probably not as accurate as the scale at the doctor's office, probably not as accurate as a DEXA scan, probably not as accurate as even more sophisticated way of looking at body composition. But it's not the case that the scale at home is going to say 150 pounds, but the DEXA scan is going to say 220. They're going to be close to each other, but you get more information and more interesting information, intricate information with the DEXA, like your visceral fat and the extracellular water and these other things that matter, the muscle to fat to ratio, these types of things. So you look at CGM as a steerer, and then you can start looking at specific questions like when I eat this food type versus this food type, do I get a substantial spike in my glycemic index? Just like suddenly my insulin go way up and my glucose levels are really high, these types of things. And so, for example, if I go take a spoonful of table sugar versus eating some broccoli, what does this do to my blood sugar and how dramatic is it? And I suspect there's pretty strong genetic and microbiome components to these things. So everybody's different in that respect. And it's entirely possible that somebody could eat a carrot and not have a strong response, and other people eat it and have a much stronger response. And that means a lot, because certain foods that raise those indices, they also tend to raise your ghrelin. They tend to raise a lot of other things. And what that translates to is more hunger, more weight gain, and also more of the macros get converted to fat. And so it's much harder to meet your diet goals in a sense. So CMG, with some cleverness behind it, is a good steering tool to help you figure out metabolically what's going on. It's not a steering tool to diagnose, which is why you have to go deeper and find out more. So as with all tools, it's about how you use the tools. How will we manage to reduce global CO2 emissions if steak is so delicious? Plant-based meat, the solution, or carbon capture? Carbon air capture powered by nuclear power. You told us about your Black Hawk. Now tell us about your boat. Well, that's very easy. I don't own a boat. Would you rather eat dog crap or shake Anthony Fauci's hand? Could I put the dog crap on Fauci's hand? I'm just looking at my boundaries here. Charles, it's hospital policy is why you can't use it. It's likely more accurate than the hospital's glucometer. Could be right, but let's be fair. There are plenty of tests that they can run that give you a lot more information. It's like when you're looking at thyroid stimulating hormone, right? You can run a whole panel on these things and get very deep. Are you Trump or Biden? Just curious. I vote libertarian, guys, so I'm so far away from that. Talk about Mr. Tippers. Mr. Tippers is having a great day. Just got picked up. He's actually heading up to Wyoming right now. Is your restaurant open? No. Nessie's will not be open until next year. It's very hard to source contractors in Wheatland, Wyoming, but we are definitely working on it. I got my first design video from the architect and the interior designer, and it looks really good. There's a lot of work we're doing on the atrium. We're actually going to hang originally I wanted the plesiosaur in the basement with the neck coming up, but we're actually going to hang the plesiosaur in the atrium. And you're drinking whiskey, you can look up at it, and the people on the first floor can look out the window at the plesiosaur coming at them, which also allows us to put a waterfall that goes into kind of a crude lake that we put in. So a lot of progress on it, and we're really moving forward. It's just there's a lot that's going into the restaurant, and it's really hard to source labor. Plus, we have to train the staff, and it's going to take at least 6 months to train the chefs to know how to cook Scottish food. Do you prefer pellet grills or charcoal smokers? I have a Traeger. What kind of a restaurant is Nessie's, the Loch Ness Monster restaurant? Nessie's, the restaurant that is inspired by the Loch Ness Monster. What is your favorite gun of all time? I have this Glock 19 that's from Shadow Systems. Absolutely amazing. Although there's this 1911 that's got this staccato slide on it that's just fucking cool. A lot of fun. Good to run a speed drill with on steel. Dislike trigger safety. You guys. You've ever had a breathalyzer in your car? No. I don't even drink, guys. Does Nessie spell serve plesiosaur meat? No. Will you play Baldur's Gate 3? Of course I will. Those guys are great. Liar. But what? All right, looks like we'll cut it here. Let's see if there's any final questions. Here we go. This is a good way to end it. Have you ever bought porn at the truck stop in Chugwater? This guy knows his pornography and his truck stops. Uh, right above the fucking Lex Friedman. I didn't even know Lex is still watching. All right, I'll give Lex the final one. No, but there's a milkshake shop in Chugwater that is absolutely phenomenal. They have a soda fountain that's been there for over 100 years. Best milkshakes you'll ever have. Baldur's Gate 3, if real, I'm in. It is real. Larian Studios is making it early release. One of the best soundtracks you'll ever listen to for a video game. And I really did enjoy it. And it's just great and magical. Problem with early release is that you get hooked and then they kill your dog. You know, you're just getting into it and then the game ends. But they've been releasing it patch by patch. They're at about patch 8, I think. And I think the full game will probably come out next year. But it's really shaping up to be something phenomenal and special. And it exceeded my expectations, where they actually managed to take something inspired by a prior art and make it better in a certain respect, and modernize it in a certain respect. And they still kept the soul of what made the Divinity series really good and Baldur's Gate really good. So highly recommend it. And those guys are phenomenal. And actually, you should definitely see if you can get the head of the studio on your podcast, because he really gets game development like John does and the others do. And they just get RPG development as well. And they've just had so many phenomenal hits and beautiful worlds and beautiful storytelling and so forth. So, as Paul Harvey likes to say, that's the rest of the story. Thank you guys for listening. It has been a very, very, very long day for me. I am going to go sleep for the weekend. Until next time,